I am not against commercial brands. There's way too much wine shaming people who love wines with residual sugar. Sugar, sweetness, is the first taste we develop as babies. It's the first signal that this food isn't poison. There's nothing wrong with the human attraction to sugar, all things in moderation. For people who love an off-dry wine, there's nothing wrong with that. Stop making them think they're less evolved for liking what they like.
When we started, one of our things was...
Don't yuck somebody else's yum.
Yeah, don't yuck someone else's yum.
That is great.
I do not like buttery, oaky Chardonnay, but I know people do. Yeah, don't yuck someone else's yum.
That is brilliant. I love that. It's a great democratizing approach without dumbing stuff down. Do you have a thirst to learn about wine? Do you love stories about wonderfully obsessive people, hauntingly beautiful places, and amusingly awkward social situations? Well, that's the blend here on the Unreserved Wine Talk podcast. I'm your host, Natalie McLean, and each week I share with you unfiltered conversations with celebrities in the wine world, as well as confessions from my own tipsy journey as I write my third book on this subject. I'm so glad you're here. Now pass me that bottle, please, and let's get started. Welcome to episode 252. Why does it seem taboo to talk about the intoxicating effects of wine? What's prompting so much wine shaming of those who enjoy easy drinking commercial wines that have residual sugar? And why do these wines play an important role in the wine market? And how can memoirs have more emotional impact than biographies? And what's the difference between the two? In today's episode, you'll hear those stories and tips that answer those questions in part 2 of our chat with Ferreira and Calla Bischoff, hosts of the fun and irreverent podcast, Boozy Biddies. You don't have to have listened to part 1 from last week first, but I hope you'll go back to it if you missed it after you finish this one. Recently, I was on CTV's Your Morning Show talking about super tasters, which I discuss in my new book, Wine Witch on Fire, Rising from the Ashes of Divorce, Defamation, and Drinking Too Much. Dr. Linda Bartoshuk at Yale University School of Medicine discovered the super taster phenomenon in 1999. Women are more than twice as likely as men to be super tasters because we have more fungiform papillae. Those are the tiny structures on the tongue that hold taste buds. Dr. Bartoshuk dipped a thyroid medication on study participants' tongues to test their sensitivity to bitterness. She divided the population into 3 groups: non-tasters with limited palates, 25%, tasters with average palates, 50%, and super tasters with very sensitive palates, 25%. Super tasters possess more than 100 times more taste buds per square inch than do regular tasters. She compares this to having 500 fingers rather than just 10, noting that super tasters live in a neon world of taste. This doesn't mean that as super tasters we're better tasters. That comes with practice. But it does mean that we're more sensitive tasters. For me personally, it's probably why I didn't start drinking alcohol until I discovered wine in my late 20s. I grew up in a Scottish family in Nova Scotia where beer and whiskey were the popular adult beverages, and I found both way too bitter. That's why the smooth, juicy Pinot Noir is my favorite wine, whereas wines with a pleasantly bitter finish, like Italian Amarone that so many people love, don't appeal to me. It's also why I don't like olives and other bitter foods. As a professional wine critic, I recommend wines that I love and don't love because I recognize there's a wide array of taste preferences among my readers. So if there's a terrific Amarone, I'll recommend it and give it a high score. I just won't be opening it for myself anytime soon. Tim Hanai, a sensory taste specialist and master of wine in California, measured the density and number of my taste buds for an article I was writing. Being a super taster also means being extra sensitive to your entire environment. Hanai knew without my telling him that I cut the tags out of my clothing, prefer tea over coffee, and have thermostat wars with my family members. There are lots of home test kits that you can order online now. Some people also test their children to see if that's why they don't eat their vegetables. It doesn't solve the vegetable problem, but it helps with understanding it. I want to give a shout out to Mary Nissen Wine Estates for stocking Wine Witch on Fire in their winery tasting room and supporting its message of hope, justice, and resilience. I'll put a link to their winery in the show notes. If you visit a winery or work at one, please encourage the owner or tasting room manager to stock the book. Just a reminder, I'll be hosting 3 fun wine tasting and book launch events this month and next. I'll be in Prince Edward County in Ontario on Thursday, September 28th. Get your tickets at clausenchase.com. On Sunday, October 1st at 7 p.m., I'll be hosting an event as part of the Toronto International Festival of Writers. Save your spot at festivalofauthors.ca. I'll also be hosting an event at the Ottawa Writers Festival on Friday, October 27th at 6:30 p.m. Register at writersfestival.org. Finally, I have a bonus event for you. Save this date on your calendar now, Thursday, November 9th at 7 p.m., as I'm planning to host a virtual online tasting that everyone can join in. Details to follow soon. Please let me know if you can join me at one or more of these events. Also, let your friends, family, and colleagues know about them. I'll include links to all of the events in the show notes at nataliemclean.com/252. Here's a review from Rochelle Levitsky in Ottawa. This memoir was definitely a page-turner for me. It evoked personal emotions. I was angry for her. I was sad for her. My empath side sat with some of these things she shared and made me pause and think about how society works. Her story made me proud of her from one woman to another for not taking it sitting down and not letting crappy people's behavior defeat her and her journey of career achievements. I have admiration and respect for strong women and like to know them and support them. I was left with a sense of happiness to know that she came out on top and that she was able to move through this chapter of her life with unapologetic courage and strength to push forward and get back up on her feet. Cheers to her. Thank you, Rochelle. If you've read this book or are reading it, I'd love to hear from you at natalie@nataliemclean.com. If you haven't got your copy yet and would like to support it and this podcast that I do on a volunteer basis, please order it from any online book retailer, no matter where you live. Every little bit helps spread the message. I'll put a link in the show notes to all the retailers worldwide at nataliemclean.com/252. Okay, on with the show.
But actually, since you do mention your Scottish heritage, just one other thing. I mean, this book, like, it sounds like you talk about everything that's in it. We talk about how it touches on misogyny in the industry. We talk about the sort of struggle with finding balance with alcohol, your divorce, dating, your relationship with your son, your relationship with your mother. It's also like a memoir. It gets into sort of how you got into the wine industry, and then sort of there's all these literary references, your favorite wines. Like, it's so, like, it all flows beautifully. Like, you would think that all of that would be sort of all over the place, but it's not. But you do mention, as part of your upbringing and sort of, I guess, sort of in terms of, you seem to excel in a a lot of what you apply yourself towards.
But you have
babe. But you have the
demons,
Highland,
driven demons, but thank you.
Yeah, the Highland dancing little episode. So that was a fun sort of touching on how you did that. You got to travel a bit when this was in high school for the most part.
That's right. So I took Highland dancing from the time I was about 5. My mom was a single mom, a teacher, and she was always trying to upgrade her teaching license in the summer. So she would drop me off at the Gaelic College in Cape Breton, Nova Scotia. And I was 5. I could not follow an itinerary. So I ended up picking strawberries most of the time, which was a lot of fun. And then wandering back to the gate to get picked up at the end of the day. But I stayed with the Highland dancing right up till I was about 20 and competed in the World Championships in Dunoon, Scotland. We went there every summer. She saved all her money. She did not have a lot. She gave up a lot of stuff for me. And yeah, that's how we got to see the world and meet other families. So not just from a touristy perspective, but really connecting on a cultural level. Because we went down the States, we did Highland Games across Canada, but that was every weekend. Summers were always dance camps. So it was very, very structured kind of childhood that I chose. I wanted it.
I love the way you talk about your mother in this book. I'm like looking at the notes that I wrote down.
And it's dedicated to her too.
It is. Yeah. Your mother, she sounds so strong and awesome.
She is. I didn't think of her like that when I was a kid because I was always saying, don't tell me what to do. I'm the boss of me. But I realized her strength as I grew up and the incredible things she had to face. She was practicing Catholic, and back in the 70s, being a divorced single mother, school teacher was just not kosher. Like it was just, I think, so we moved around a lot from town to town. We moved, 14 times by the time I was 10. But I realized now what it took to do that, or I have a sense of what it took to do that, to how strong she had to be for us. And then have the discipline to pump everything she had, time and money, into what I was doing.
The admiration you have for her is just so amazing. I, have a very strong relationship with my mother, and I think she's incredibly strong. And it just it made me want to call her.
Yeah.
It made me just want, and I talk to my mother every day already anyway. I'm living in Denver now. They're back on the East Coast. But it was after that, I just wanted to call her and be I love you so much. Thank you so much for being everything that you've been. So I think, that hit home a lot too. I cried reading your book 6 different times.
Oh, excellent. No, really, yes. Thank you.
I cry a lot in general. I'm just an emotional human being.
Yeah. No, there's a lot of teary parts in it. So, but I hope that, you are connecting with it emotionally. And I think that is the most you can ask for from a memoir. It's just to resonate that way, that feels somehow good for you as well. The tears and the joy and everything else. Because we can't live 60 different lives, but we can read 60 different memoirs and feel as though we did.
I like memoirs a lot because it resonates differently than a biography. Biography is born here, married, then kids, career, death. And I've read some memoirs. And it's one of my favorite books in the world to read. Stephen King's On Writing is one of my favorite memoirs
that is
ever.
A master. Oh, yeah.
But what I took a lot more from that was more about passion for the literature industry and English. I connected more with reading your book on an emotional level than, I'm an English major. That was my degree. So, that was just really inspiring as far as my passion for books and whatnot. I was never a writer. I wanted to be a college English professor one day. So that was my dream. And then Kara introduced me to wine, and poof, things changed
ruined
from
everything.
there. Yeah, things changed real quick for me.
And I think, you make a great point, Calla. Biography is kind of a linear exposition of an entire life. And some lives are fascinating and they carry you through the book. A memoir is one slice in time, usually a year, maybe 2. And it's about something that happened that was transformative for the person, the author. And I think what draws us to memoirs is that interaction with the characters.
Yeah, there's themes to your book. You obviously you really hone into the witch thing. I mean, your first of all, queen of puns over here. You are. Your chapter names are just
and Karma's a witch.
Yeah, and Kara, every when we do these introductions for our podcast, I usually try to make some dumb pun. We did our Rhone episode, and I was there's no place like Rhone. I'm clicking around heroes 3 times, And Kara is just what? Why? Again? And so when I told her today I wrote her introduction, I had to send her a text message being I promise it's normal. Because I can't, first of all, I'd be too nervous to try to make a pun in front of the pun queen over here.
Why not?
But I don't know. Well, it'll probably show up at some point or another. But you definitely have themes. There's, besides the witch, there's just this constant kind of play of the fairy tale in your book too, which I know can play into witches. There's, always the Wicked Witch and the Wizard of Oz, or, in Sleeping Beauty or Snow White, But I love that my entire English thesis was based on fairy tales. So
that's fantastic. I love that.
But this idea, you have your Prince Charming, in your life, and there's been all these other things. So you definitely have that thematic arc there that is the fairy tale. That's really cool. And it does kind of make a memoir seem less rigid than a biography.
Yeah, it's just weaving in one more thread so that the whole pattern is more interesting than a straight linearity. And yeah, I can't resist a good pun. So there's, good witch hunting and all the rest of it. But I have to say this while it's on my mind, because I'm going to blurt it out. What did the green grape say to the purple grape?
I don't know.
Dude, stop holding your breath.
Oh my God. Were were you a dad in a past lifetime?
Yeah. No, my son, who's in the story, his name has changed, but he says, Mom jokes are worse than dad jokes. I'm just letting you know. Stop it. Just stop it.
I love that.
But you did mention, I think at certain points in the book, one, that some other people in the industry maybe had taken a bit of issue with maybe one of your books that was Red, White, and Drunk All Over, but it's sort of like actually acknowledging the effect that alcohol does have, that some perhaps other wine writers or even other spirits writers, but that sometimes it's, maybe considered unsophisticated to acknowledge that we're enjoying this substance, but that it also has this effect if we enjoy it too much.
Well, yes, I got the look askance at tastings because Red, White, and Drunk All Over, a tipsy search. Wait a minute, I'm getting all the subtitles. A Wine-Soaked Journey from Grape to Glass was my first book back in 2006. So it was at a time when people didn't talk about the buzz in wine, the alcohol. We talked about it like it was, I don't know, something else, not grape juice, but something that didn't have any alcoholic effects. But for me as a dancer, the sensory experience of wine is also that full-bodied effect. And I still like it. I just have to monitor it more closely. But yeah, so I was all out there because in my 2 books talking about how wine affected me. And I think, well, I know people related to that because I got tons and tons of emails and letters after those books as well.
Yeah, I feel like wine has been put on this pedestal for such a long time. One of your quotes that really resonated with me, and the idea of like terroir and how I feel like people just look at wine, especially professionally, as just the terroir and not that alcoholic component that makes you buzzed. There's just this art, this history, this lineage to different vineyards and chateaus and XYZ. But what you say, that's why we put wine, not cooking oil, on the dinner table in its original packaging. It matters who made the wine, where it was made, and what happened that year. And that I feel like does become such a focus of people in the industry and how they sell it and how they look at it, not realizing that drinking a glass of wine is the same as drinking a Coors or, a vodka soda. Like it's still going to get that, dial moving where you are becoming more inebriated every time you take another sip.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people in the industry are afraid to talk about it. Well, I hope more and more are not now, but because it would seem to be unprofessional that, you're just drawn to writing about wine or alcohol in general because it just, you could have easily, been a movie critic or a, dance critic. But I think there is a whole-bodied experience that draws us, and maybe we are moths to a flame, but I think that is part of the allure of wine because it has buzz. And, not to acknowledge it, I think, is not just misguided, but you're deluding yourself.
There's some kind of sophistication to wine versus like me throwing back 6 White Claws at a baseball game. Like there is something different there that just seems elevated in your drinking experience versus just, like I said, going out and getting a gin and tonic or just a couple hard seltzers or whatever the choice is. The industry shows that too. There is like this assumption of snobbery, and that does exist. But a lot of people are like, "Oh, are you like a sommelier?" I'm like, "No, I just sell wine." Like I'm the worst at tasting things. But versus if I was like, "Oh, I'm a Coors rep" or something like that. There's just something more elegant and sophisticated that people start to put wine further and further up this pedestal and becomes like culty in a lot of ways.
Absolutely. Well, it is the drink of conversation. I mean, we don't generally knock back like a Pinot Noir the way we might with a vodka shooter. So it is the slow drink of conversation in its best form. But I do think that also gets a hoity-toity image when it's taken to an extreme or that's the only thing it is, that there's nothing to do with the body here experiencing any sort of buzz here. We're all up in our heads talking about, well, it was this appellation and the rains that spring and etc.
I think that limits the experience too. Like we talked about the podcast, when I have a really good champagne, like I feel it in my body differently. Like it actually makes my cheeks and my thighs tingle.
Carrie gets tingly. She gets tingly thighs.
I get tingly thighs.
It's one of my favorite things. I'm like, oh, on this episode, Kara's thighs are definitely going to tingle.
They're going to tingle.
I love that. Oh, that is so good.
But I do feel like champagne is just the most notable one. But there's different wines where I do feel like the buzz hits me physically differently. Like if you just pay attention to it. And if you are disconnected from your body or if you're just staying in your head, you're missing sort of that nuance.
that full experience. And that is something also I sort of struggled with in the book, is connecting my head back with my body. And I think that's part of moderation too, not being so up in your head that you just, it's all work, 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 work. And then I need to have a drink to get back down into my body to relax. If you can integrate the two, the mind and the body, I think you can integrate the two aspects of wine, its intellectual part and its physical buzz. And I think it's just a more holistic way. But, tingly thighs, that sounds really, I'm going to be looking for that with champagne from now on. So,
I would love to make a thing tingle my thighs every now and then.
yes, that should be a champagne brand or something.
Tingly thighs.
I don't think the Champagne region will allow that. Probably just be like an American sparkling.
Oh, well.
Done using like the Coca-Cola method. No kidding.
Yes.
So you talk about Tasting Alley. That's your hallway of all of these samples that are sent to you from whatever, just wine everywhere.
I would like a tasting alley.
Yeah. Kara, actually, her husband just moved in with her. They've been living, they had a place in the city and a house in Connecticut, and he's been back in the house in Connecticut full time because he's switching jobs right now. But Kara was sending me a video this weekend of them combining their bars together.
Oh, that's an important move.
My little,
that's a serious...
And my little goddaughter is like putting wine on the shelf. And I was like,
she was pulling the bottles out of the box and handing them to me.
To start them early. So you're developing your tasting alley.
I do, yeah. We got to work on the wine tasting alley, though. We do have, our wine in our root cellar, but we need like an actual...
But when it comes to wine, too, I had a question written down that you've tasted thousands at this point. And you have a book about finding approachable and affordable wine. Where do the idea of like commercial wines stand in your life? I know, because we've talked a lot about how there is still in the industry, it's just like there's craft beer and there's cores. There's also wine that is unique to every vintage. And there's wine that is very much homogenous year to year, just to be something comfortable for the buyer to go back to. They always know that this New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc is going to taste the same every year. So there's comfort to that. And there's people who like to look at the new changes. In your life, as far as what you like drinking, do you have a place in your palate that is commercial? Or is it just kind of what sticks to you in the moment?
First of all, I have to rise above my own personal bias and prejudice. I love Pinot Noir. I love it dry. I love Burgundy. So a wine with a lot of residual sugar and tannin and oak is not going to appeal to me personally, but I'm trying to think of my readers. I always say my liver for the people, just out there sacrificing myself yet again, tiny, tiny violins. But I try to think, would someone who loves a full-bodied Cabernet or whatever it is, with some nice residual sugar, would that person like this for this price? I do consider price, and I will recommend it. So I am not against commercial brands. I mean, I think they serve an important role. I do think that people who follow my reviews probably are not huge on the, commercial brands. They're not looking for wine reviews anyway, but I will review all of the wines that I think are a fit for someone who loves that style. And I think there's way too much wine shaming going on about people who love wines with residual sugar. Sugar, sweetness, is the first taste we develop as babies. I mean, it's the first signal that this food isn't poison. There's nothing wrong with the human attraction to sugar, all things in moderation. But so for people who love an off-dry wine or, there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, stop making them think they're less evolved or something for liking what they like.
When we started, we call it the Boozy Biddy 10 Commandments or the 10 rules of Boozy Biddies. And a lot of them was because we approached this podcast trying to make it like irreverent and silly and just like easy talking. One of our things was actually Kara, what was
don't
it?
yuck somebody else's yum.
Yeah, don't yuck someone else's yum.
Great. Brilliant.
Just like, hey, just because, and that's, I do not like buttery, oaky Chardonnay, but I know people do. And I would never like see my friend or someone at a bar order like some big Rombauer type wine and be like, oh, no. I'm like, hey, you do you, the same way that I might order like an off-dry Riesling and someone's like, oh, Riesling? Interesting. So one of our things was, don't yuck someone else's
That is brilliant. I love that. It's a great democratizing, kind of approach without dumbing stuff down. There's a difference there. And, I used to really dislike Gewürztraminer because I found it too over the top florally. And I would write tasting notes like, if you like Gewürztraminer, this is a good one, until the Gewürztraminer crowd came after me going, what do you mean if you like Gewürztraminer? Stop being a snob about Gewürztraminer. So I stopped qualifying it. It's like, this is a good Gewürztraminer, period.
You do mention throughout the book at certain moments, it's the memoir, so you're recounting different periods of time where like we were drinking this wine, and you'll name it and you'll usually share a bit about if it was, a female producer or some little anecdote about the actual wine. I just out of curiosity, do you actually have notes in the journals you mentioned that would reflect that was the actual wine you were drinking? Is it the wine you remember at the time, or did you sort of go through some of your favorite wines and decide which ones you want to feature throughout the book?
It was a combination of both. Like, Dear Diary, many Pinot Noirs today. It was the wines I was drinking, but also now 10 years on, I have woven in wines that I think have a great story to tell. Many of them are about women, but not exclusively. But I love a good story, like Donna Fugata, which I just love saying. Donna Fugata is in a Sicilian winery. It means fugitive woman, Donna, woman, Fugata, fugitive. The vines are planted in the volcanic rock of Mount Etna, which is still an active volcano. So those people know the value of life and so on. But I thought a woman on the run, and she's on the hot seat because it's sul volcano, meaning I thought that's a perfect pairing for my situation. And I wasn't attempting to trivialize the issues, but I think you absolutely need humor, even in the darkest times. And they say, comedy is pain plus time. So someone reading this memoir might say, oh my God, how can you even joke about anything in here? But I've got the lens of time to pull back and put it in perspective. And I think even when you're watching like a horror movie, not saying that this memoir is a horror movie, but you need that comic relief, that to breathe and to give that release of tension. We need that in life. We need it in books.
I think you walked that balance really beautifully.
Thank you.
Perfectly.
Yeah. I said we were crying, laughing. I have to admit, I have not finished the book only because I hate e-readers, and I'm waiting to have a physical copy to read that last third so I can curl up with a glass of wine on the couch and truly savor it.
Okay. Well, spoiler alert, there's a happy ending. I want people to know that. So
Perfect. Well, I'm really looking forward to it.
I was so excited. I'm just like, I've read it, but I'm still going to purchase my own physical copy as well.
Oh,
Karen,
thank you.
I mean, I do better at e-readers than Kara does, but I just think I just want your book. And the only books on my bookshelf behind me are wine books, to be honest with you. I'm like a voracious reader, having been an English lit major, but that's why I got an e-reader, because I was like, I live in a studio apartment in downtown Denver. I don't have a lot of places to put things, but all the books I have are ones that have been very special to me from, back my English lit days, or I'm looking at them now, my wine books and stuff like that. So I can't wait to add yours to my collection.
I would be happy to send you both personally signed book plates, as well as any of your listeners who buy the book. I'm happy to mail you book plates. And if people are curious about the book, I've also got some juicy bonuses, some online private tastings and so on for those who purchase the book at winewitchonfire.com.
I love it.
I'll be doing that.
So our last thing before we wrap up with you.
Is there anything else that we have not touched on before we get to
that
the last
you would
question?
like to discuss? This is your platform.
Oh, well, thank you. No, the only other thing is I do have a free companion guide for book clubs and wine groups. So there's discussion questions about the book, but there's also tips on how to organize your own informal wine tasting. And that's also at winewitchonfire.com.
We're super excited that you, reached out to us to be on this. Like,
yes,
we felt
I
like
love
we
your
did
podcast.
something. We felt like you did something right, that you're listening to our podcast.
You guys are great. As I said, I love the interaction. I love your approach. It's smart yet informal. Like it's really terrific. Both of you. Well done.
I think that's, that way that we're trying to change the industry too. I mean, to kind of full circle it back around before we go into like our last icebreaker, it's not that they're dying off, because they're still alive, but there's a large portion of the industry that has created it to be this way that is retiring, at least. There are a lot of the people that we've found difficulty with being a woman in the industry, or if people of color have had issues, a lot of those people have done this to the point where they're at retirement age. So we're welcoming in like a lot of new, younger, more open-minded people to the industry. So it's a slow process, but it is happening.
Sure. Just like those vines and the renewal and the new season and bud break. There you are, your millennial grapes, you.
Have you prepared 2 truths and 1 lie for us?
Oh, yes.
Okay. Because this is where Kara and I try to guess if we've gotten to know you well enough throughout this thing.
Ooh, drum roll. Okay. I love this. What fun. Okay. So here are the 3 things. I've been stung by a jellyfish. I was in a commercial for breakfast cereal when I was 7. And I've never had a cup of coffee.
She says she drinks tea a lot in the book.
Well, she did mention, we didn't touch on it, but you're a super taster. I think I'm a super taster.
I'm a bad
I don't know where to go
taster.
get tested.
I'm the opposite of a super taster.
Okay, so that one could very well be true.
Coffee could be, because she does talk about how she started drinking tea first.
I've been stung by a jellyfish is so random, though.
It is random, but that could be the kicker. And breakfast cereal. I mean, she was performing a lot as a dancer.
Were you Highland dancing in a commercial?
Yeah.
I'm going to go with jellyfish as a lie.
You know what? I think I might go with jellyfish too, because there's not any mention of any beach vacations in your book.
Okay, ladies, good guess, but no. So I grew up in Nova Scotia, and my mom, we were in Cape Breton.
That's on the water.
So it's on the water. I've been stung many times.
That's directly on the water. God damn it, Calla. The U.S. doesn't get a lot of culture.
For some reason, I thought jellyfish was more warmer waters, though.
I was tropical, I guess.
Yeah. No. There are jellyfish up
so
there. The white ones don't sting, but the red ones do.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so.
Is that a wine allegory there? No, just kidding.
No, but I could probably weave it back if we keep going.
I'm going to go with coffee then. She's had it once. She's had it once and didn't like it. It's my bad. I mean, we've already lost, but
then I'm going with breakfast cereal, Kara.
Okay, who won?
Well, I've never had a cup of coffee. That's true. And so
Calla won.
The commercial for breakfast cereal. That's just a dream that never came true. Sad and broken.
Don't worry, you might be able to be in a breakfast cereal commercial one day if anyone from Cheerios is listening. Right,
the breakfast of champions, Chardonnay and cornflakes.
But that's so specific, though. Why were you dreaming of being in a cereal commercial?
Because when you guys said we're going to do 2 truths and a lie, I Googled, how can you play 2 truths and a lie and win?
She's such an overachiever.
It's just like, make sure it's not the last one. The lie isn't the last one. Say it with conviction. Be specific so they think that it's like, oh my God, I can't even let this go. I think
funny.
I think we've gotten almost everybody else's. So
really? No, we failed.
No, but we've done pretty well.
Yeah?
No. I think we have. I'm just like trying to think of her.
I think 2 shepherds we got.
We were okay.
You got that?
No, we failed at that.
Did we? Okay.
She said that she speaks donkey, and we're like, she has donkey. So she's like, no, I don't neigh it. Then what are you guys talking about?
But it was the languages that she changed the number. Okay, fine. Maybe we're not amazing, but that said, this is the one that I feel like we've been like completely just.
Most of our ones, we had 2 of my favorite bartenders in Denver come on to talk about root cocktails and the idea of the 6 like classic cocktails. And they're dipshits and I love them so much. They're 2 of my closest friends, but like, they're like, I've never been to a nude beach, or like I've been to a nude beach twice. And they're like, no, the lie is that I've actually been 3 times. I'm like, God, seriously?
That's splitting hairs,
that's how enjoyable they can be.
I am so impressed that you Googled how to succeed at 2 truths and a lie.
It's kind of sad. Like you would think I'd learned from what I wrote in my memoir, stop being a damn perfectionist and competitive. But no, it continues, actually.
I mean, this has just been so amazing to have you on today, and we really appreciate you. Before we sign off, would you like to say anything else, or have you?
No, but don't tempt me. WineWitchOnFire.com. There we go. I would love to hear from your listeners, and they're welcome to join me on my podcast too. But it's been so fun, Kara, Calla. Like we need to do this in person with wine.
Oh, we will come visit you 100%. Just tell us when.
Find me and hunt me down. I will do the same.
Seriously, this will actually be fun. We'll see how many listeners we actually have when they actually respond to this. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah, let me know.
Thank you again so much, Natalie, for joining us. Our send off is go double fist yourselves.
Orgasms and alcohol.
Cheers to orgasms and alcohol.
Cheers.
Well, there you have it. I hope you enjoyed my chat with Calla and Kara. In the show notes, you'll find the full transcript of my conversation with them, links to their website and podcast, the video versions of these conversations on Facebook and YouTube Live, where you can order my book online now no matter where you live, and links to my 4 upcoming wine tasting and book launch events. That's all in the show notes at nataliemaclean.com/252. Email me if you have a sip, tip, question, or if you've read my book or are in the process of reading it at natalie@nataliemaclean.com. I would love to hear from you. If you missed episode 2, go back and take a listen. I talk about that taboo subject, the buzz of wine. I'll share a short clip with you now to whet your appetite. This was the alarming headline in a recent health study. Quote, "No amount of alcohol is safe," unquote. What? It was published in The Lancet, one of the oldest and most prestigious medical journals in the world. My first thought was, no, say it ain't so. My next thought was, I need to ask my doctor friends about this. Turns out that the study has several flaws. What a relief. It's been proven in the past that moderate drinkers who have 1 glass of wine a day live longer than those who don't drink at all. There was also criticism published in the medical community about the alarmist headline and how the numbers and statistics were presented. The best advice I got? Stress is a bigger concern when it comes to both longevity and heart disease, the biggest killer. I was told, relax, drink moderately, and try not to stress out about this study, Nat. If you liked this episode, please email or tell one friend about it this week, especially someone you know who'd be interested in the wines, tips, and stories we shared. You won't want to miss next week when we chat with Jane Lopes, a sommelier, author, and wine importer. Her first book was a personal and educational guide to wine called Vignette, Stories of Life and Wine in 100 Bottles. Jane's second book, How to Drink Australian, co-authored with her husband, Jonathan Ross, has just been published. She'll join us from her home in New York City. Thank you for taking the time to join me here. I hope something great is in your glass this week. Maybe a wine that gives you a slight enjoyable buzz. You don't want to miss one juicy episode of this podcast, especially the secret, full-bodied bonus episodes that I don't announce on social media. So, subscribe for free now at nataliemaclean.com/subscribe. Meet me here next week. Cheers.